Well, hello, avid readers. I am here with Kerry Nietz, and we are talking
Hello.
about all things sci-fi and
Yeah,
vampires and Amish, and I promise it'll all tie together. But Kerry, why don't you just take a minute and introduce yourself?
sure. My name is Kerry Nietz. I've been writing for 15 years or so now. Have over a dozen books in print, over a million words, mostly science fiction, one nonfiction book. There's a novella and some short stories in there as well. But yeah, probably most well known for Amish Vampires in Space. Got me mentioned on the Tonight Show. Um,
That's pretty
but
fun.
Yes, very fun. But yeah, I have a lot of fun stories out there. I think some cyberpunk and some straight sci-fi, and yeah,
So
fun
fun. Well,
stuff.
so all the sci-fi is my family's favorite. I'm the one that writes the regular Amish, not the Amish zombies in space. But my family
Yeah,
loves Star Trek, Star Wars,
sure.
Stargate. I mean, all the things all the time. So it's super fun that I'm starting to read more science fiction. I'm like, okay, I could get what these people like. And
Yeah,
we're going to be talking today about Frayed. We'll talk
sure.
about your other books too. But this one, Railmaker's Book of the Year a couple years ago. So explain a little bit about what it means to be a Book of the Year winner with Makers.
Well, that means you've. So they have genre awards. So there's like fantasy and there's science fiction and there's trying to remember what all there's like a
Like
horror
young
category.
adults
Yeah,
and
there's a
yeah.
horror category and new author. And so each of those have an award, and then the book of the year is sort of the winner of those. So it's kind of the top book of the year. Obviously a big honor.
Which is so fun. Yeah, huge honor.
Yeah, yeah.
And so tell us a little
Unexpected.
bit about the book because I mean, I'm reading this, I'm like, these aren't like people. Like when
Yeah,
I started
no,
reading this book.
no. So
But
Frayed.
then
Okay,
yeah.
a number of years ago, I wrote this trilogy called the Dark Trench Trilogy, and it takes place in this uh, future world 500 years from now, where the whole world is kind of under Sharia law, so kind of Islamic law.
Mhm.
And the main character in that series was this guy named Sandfly, and he had an implant in his head that connected him to the future version of the internet. And this was back when no one was talking about that idea. Now it gets talked about, and it connects him to the internet and it lets him um, talk to others of his kind and also work on the technology he needs to fix. So like robots
Mhm.
and large machines and whatever. But it also controls his behavior to some extent. So it's sort of like a bit in a horse's mouth. If he
Mm,
because with all that power, his masters don't want him getting out of control. He could lead a
right.
robot army or something. So he's sort of part of a class of people, and um, that series had some time away from Earth, like it's some space travel, and there's a period of time there that readers were wondering, okay, what happens on Earth while he's
Yeah.
away? And so Frayed is like a parallel series. It starts at the exact same moment, but follows a different character while he's on Earth. So, and Threadbare is the name of that character. So,
Yep. And
slightly
so
younger, slightly more immature, and but fun. Sort of fun group. So troubled but fun.
yeah, and it's so interesting, to I mean, so it's Earth, but it's not like our Earth. So do you wanna
No,
explain kind of a little bit about the story world? And I'm just so fascinated how people's minds can just create these story
yeah,
worlds that are so
yeah,
completely different. I just write the real stuff, but explain a little bit about that.
yeah. So it's very much like cyber fiction. So very high tech world, um, robots that are everywhere. The machines
Mhm,
are connected as well, and you can converse with them. Um, the and there's a class of people who are like the masters, so they have all the toys, they have all the technology, and they also have these servants that are called debuggers, and that's what
mhm.
Threadbare is one of. And so he's sent out on when things break down, he has to go and fix them, and he's like the fixer guy, but he's somewhat of a slave too. So he's
Yeah.
but it kind of fits, it kind of fits like that society in the past has had slavery has been a part of it, so it kind of fits, but in the future. So
Yep.
yeah,
Very cool.
yeah,
Well, I just love that you're able to take these ideas and build these worlds around them and create these characters that are similar, like they have similarly emotions and stuff,
yeah,
but the situations that they're dealing with are completely different.
yeah.
And I know you mentioned, we're going to go into that too, the Amish, was it Zombies in Space was the one that for you, your first book that kind of
Most
got
vampires in
everyone?
space.
Vampires, there was a vampire,
Yeah,
so it's vampires and then zombies and then werewolves.
yes,
So
yes,
I remember, I think I was at a publishing conference and someone mentioned that, and everyone laughed, and they were like, "No, it's a real book, and it's
yeah,
actually very well written."
yeah.
So talk, and
Thank
you
you.
mentioned that it was mentioned on the Tonight Show. Just talk
Yes,
about like where you got that idea from, and
sure,
how that was just like something completely out of the box, but there's also elements that like typical Amish or other types of books kind of fit into it too.
sure. Yeah, you're probably familiar with this. My publisher at the time, he was a fic guy, speculative fiction, fantasy, sci-fi. That's what he was looking for, and he would go to all these writing conferences, and every other publisher was looking for Amish fiction, like
Yeah.
Amish romance. It's what they wanted, and because obviously it's a popular category, and so his joke was, the only Amish fiction I'm looking for is if it's something like Amish vampires in space. Like it's a joke he used over and over, and one day he sent a mock cover around to the authors of that book, Amish Vampires in Space. And you can find it actually in the my print book. It's kind of one of the inside cover there. And it had this Amish lady who obviously had fangs, and there was a casket in the back with a guy with the black hat in it, and there was obviously a planet in the background. So they were in a spaceship of some sort. And so it was kind of this joke, and we kind of went back and forth. I was like, someone should write that book. I don't know if it's me because it seems kind of campy, and I'm sort of a hard sci-fi guy, but just the title alone, I think would intrigue people. And so we kind of let it rest, and then I got this idea. I was like, okay, how would the Amish get into space and become vampires and not
Mm.
be campy? How would it happen? And so I kind of got this idea. I started writing, and I got like 30,000 words in, and I sent him email, and I said, "Hey, guess what I'm doing?" And when he got done laughing, he said, "Okay, if it's any good, I'll when you finish, send it to me, and I'll publish it." And so another 100,000 words later, and finished it and sent it to him, and he liked it, and the rest is kind of history. That's sort of where it started. So
And it's so funny because it's like something that you have to talk about. Like when
right,
you hear about it, you're like, I gotta hear about this. I gotta find about this. You want to go search for the cover because
yeah.
it's so unusual. And so how did it even get on the Tonight Show, or how did it get out there? Where I mean, I'd
I
obviously heard about it a while ago.
yeah, I don't know exactly. Like one person contacted me and said that they thought like their cousin had sent it to the NBC or
Mm,
something, like because Jimmy Fallon did this do not read list, and it
uh-huh.
really, it was kind of joking, like he would find these obscure books and make jokes about them, and some of it was mean, but some of it wasn't,
Right.
and and yeah, and so it got on that list, and he pulls a book. If you watch the video, he pulls a book out and he sits it on the Tonight Show desk there, and says Amish vampires in space. Do we really need another Amish vampire space novel? Been there, done that. Got the T-shirt, and then he puts it away. So it wasn't that bad, and it makes for a good picture too. I actually have a picture up in my, of it on the Tonight Show desk, and I have it in my office here. So, yeah, it was kind of a cool thing. And I actually did send him a T-shirt then. I don't know if he got it or not, but I did
Yeah.
send it to him. So,
He
so
wears it when he gardens or something, I'm
yeah,
sure.
yeah, probably, yeah, probably. So that was kind of cool. Yeah, and then it sort of blew up. Like I was watching Twitter at the time, and I saw there were 12 different countries, 7 different languages, and you see like kind of blah 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 Amish vampire space, and you know what they're talking about, and so then I have to Google translate it and see what they're saying, but yeah, it was pretty cool, really cool opportunity to sort of dialogue with people all over, and yeah, it's fun. But
That is so cool. So when you first started writing, did you think that would happen? That you'd be writing about
you,
Amish vampires
you,
in space?
hmm, I guess if you look back, you might think so. I mean, we like Amish country isn't that far from where I live. It's something
Mhm.
a place that we go on occasion, you know. Um, but and I always like science fiction, so I grew up on a farm, so there are like elements that kind of
It kind of fits
go in,
together.
go in there. So maybe it was destiny. I don't know, but yeah, I'm glad.
I
I'm glad it happened. It was a fun thing, and I enjoyed the characters and the situations. They're just kind of fun, and gives me a chance to kind of play with a bunch of themes and also sort of expand my knowledge of science, because it's like trying to come up with a science fiction way of making vampires and zombies. You kind of have to do some research.
Yeah,
So
has to be believable.
yeah, as much as you can. So
It's true.
yeah,
Yep, I love that. So tell us how you began your writing journey, because I know you're in the software industry for
sure.
many years. How did you go over to the writing side?
Yeah. Yeah, I worked at Microsoft before being a writer, and before that, I was at a small software company called Fox Software. We made a database program called Fox Pro, and Microsoft bought us for that product. But I always wanted to be a writer. I knew even when I was a
Mhm.
kid. Like my mom finds scraps of things that I started writing back then. I was always into science fiction, but everything. I would read everything. I was one of those kids where I don't know if you remember Scholastic book
Oh,
catalogs,
yes,
but I would
yes.
be like, stack. I don't know how my parents afforded them all, but they did. They did buy me like everything I'd ask for.
Those were the best, those were the best, just filling out the little line
Yeah,
in the back,
the
and you could
check
have won
box.
by all the ones
Yeah,
you want, yeah.
yeah, yeah. And then show up. It'd be like it's like Christmas, and but I'd read them all, so they'd keep buying them for me, and so yeah, I'd always wanted to be a writer, and um, sort of during the time I was at Microsoft, I was actually writing down my experience at Fox Software was sort of unusual as a small software company where I worked. My boss was actually part owner, and it was a very
Mm.
small team, and there were a lot of family members in the company, so you never knew sort of who you were running, who you might be offending at this moment, like
Oh,
you had,
yeah.
and plus my boss was very aggressive and very driven, and so he was really brilliant technologically, but as a manager was sort of a bully, and so
Mm.
it was a very unusual situation. I had people I worked with were really interesting characters, and like he once, it's snowing today, so this comes to mind, but he once picked us up in during a snowstorm. He'd bought a new truck the day before, and he picked the developers up in the snowstorm where it was like 10 inches, snow,
Oh
and
my goodness.
yeah, and took us to work and then left. So he left us there, in the snowstorm to find our own way home. So, it was kind of crazy stuff like that. And so my first book was this nonfiction title about those 4 years of programming and sort of how I ended up at Microsoft in after all that, and um, yeah, and then from there, it just kind of gravitated because science fiction is such uh, a love of mine, and I probably like every writer, I wrote 3 or 4 books that no one will ever see,
Yep, exactly.
but
I don't even know if I have them anywhere, but yeah.
yeah. So and ideas from them still come up on occasion, but yeah, and then I actually was writing my last novel, and which was about this coder type guy of the future, and it was A Star Curiously Sing was the name of the book eventually, but I just had this idea and I wanted to write it in first person present tense because I
Mm.
just thought that was kind of this interesting, very immediate way of writing, and it kind of fit the character. And so, but on the other hand, I'd been doing it for a number of years and not had any success getting anything published, which also most writers probably understand.
Yep.
And I didn't want my kids to see me fail over and over again. And so so I was like, okay, this is gonna be my last novel. I'm just gonna write it sort of for me. I don't know if anybody's ever gonna see it, but I just have this idea and I got to try it out. And so I started writing actually in an airport, and then I got a few months later, finished it, and when I was done, it's like, okay, I could set this aside, but there's some cool things in here that it's kind of unique,
Yeah. Yeah.
and so I I knew of a guy who had a small publishing house, but he also he had been an acquisitions editor before, and so for a fee, he would read through your story and give you his opinion based on that, his experience.
Yeah.
And so I sent it to him. I was like, it was a couple $100. It was worth it for me to know
Yeah.
because I'm striking out the other way. And um, so months went by, and then finally he sent me email and he said, I'm reading it now. I love it. And if it's this good all the way through, I'll publish it myself. And so
Wow.
that's how my last book got published. It was supposed to be my last, but actually it was my first novel. So
Awesome. And what was the title of that one?
I started curiously singing. So that was the
Oh, that's
first.
and that I love that title.
Yeah, thanks.
It's such a
Yeah,
great title, and that's part of a series, isn't it?
yeah. That's the Dark Trend series. There's a trilogy and Freight is sort of the parallel story to
Okay.
that.
Yeah.
So,
Yep. Okay.
so,
Very cool. Okay, so you have
yeah,
that series, and then the Frayed series, which is parallel, and we
yeah,
have the Amish Outer Space series. What
yes.
else? What else do you have going on? What are you working on? Tell us all the details.
Yeah, so and then I have a standalone novel called Mask, which it's futuristic, but it's not quite as far in the future. It takes place in the Pacific Northwest, where you can vote on anything, including people. So you can kind of vote them out of the city,
Oh
and
wow,
yeah, and
that's kind of
so
not too far. No, just kidding.
no, right, right. I mean, that's what it touches on, and just this idea of the majority rule. Well, if the majority says it's the right
Hmm.
thing, it must be the right thing, right? And so the the main character, the mask, is this guy who he picks you up when you get voted out. So it's kind of a fun and very high action as opposed to some of my other ones that are a little more cerebral. So that was fun. And then I wrote a series for. I've been still writing a series for a gaming company called Takamo, and that game started out in the 80s as a mail-in turn-based sci-fi game. And
Oh
so
wow.
yeah, and so it grew to like 10,000 people playing this game, where they would make moves and write them on a piece of paper and send them in, and then the computer would run the numbers and then send them back what happened.
Oh my
Well,
goodness.
yeah, I know, crazy, and but cool. And they now they're working on a massive multiplayer online game, and they wanted stories set in that universe. And considering it's been around for decades now, there's quite a backstory to it. It rivals Star Wars and as far as characters and worlds and whatever. And so they the publisher there, he was looking for somebody. He sent me emails like, I want a series where the main characters are man-sized rats. They're aliens, but they're man-sized rats. Is that something you'd be interested in doing? And I was like, yeah, I can do that.
I
You
love that. Your mind's like,
So
all right, I can make that
yeah, yeah,
work.
yeah, that would be fun. So there's a series of those, and the most recent of them was released last November, and it takes place, like, the premise is that there's a ship full of spacefaring rats that they lost they had a hold full of wine and cheese and they lost it, like it got destroyed, and so they happened to cross Earth around the time of the Battle of Waterloo. So they end up
That's so hilarious.
landing landing in the area of French territory there, and accidentally getting caught up in the Battle of Waterloo. So or
Oh, that's awesome.
yeah. So it's called Rataloo. That's the name of it, because rats. That's the
I have some adult sons. I
it
think
is.
they would love getting that for their birthdays. I have one birthday coming up. I think I'm totally gonna order that because that is
Yeah,
so fun. And
it is
I
fun.
think it's so interesting how you're able to like, okay, rats, Waterloo. Okay, we can make this work.
Yeah,
All right,
yeah,
zombies, outer space. I mean, I think that our minds and the ability to create things is so amazing, and I just love that you're like just willing to try. And then,
yeah.
I mean, but it does take skill because you're building the scenes and you're,
Right.
plotting and conflict and all those things. You're just taking it like to this next creative level, which is super fun.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah,
also wanted to know, yeah, go ahead.
yeah, I like the challenge, like it gets the wheels turning. It's like, okay, how would that happen? What would happen? So yeah, I like those kind of challenges. That's
All right.
Science fiction is great for that kind of thing too, right? It's the what if.
Yeah. And so here's a question too, because I know like at Realm Makers they talk a lot about this. Like, how does the faith element like weave into either science fiction or fantasy, or you just talk in general? Because we're talking about like different species or different situations or
Right.
world powers. Like, how does that tie into it?
Sure. Well, like with the Amish trilogy, obviously the Amish are a Christian sect, so they're going to bring all that along,
Mm-hmm.
and sort of, and I'm sure you're well aware of like their beliefs on the military and their beliefs on
Yeah.
self defense,
Mm-hmm.
and so and that's kind of what drove that is like how interesting is that if they the sort of pacifist society meets this vampires who are definitely not that way. They're the complete
Yeah.
opposite.
Exactly.
And people caught in the middle, and at what level do you decide? Okay, I'm going to protect my family now. And so it's I think that's interesting, and obviously faith plays a heavy role in those decisions, and with the Amish, every decision is how does this affect community? What is
Yeah. Absolutely.
community? And the vampires have a community of their own. So and it's fun, and yeah, it usually starts with kind of a theme that I want to explore. Just like the mask, I said, it's like, okay, does the majority determine what's
Mm,
true, and what's right? And so, yeah, things like that, and like with the Dark Trench trilogy was really about freedom and what is freedom, and what would happen if in this future society where the Christian God is kind of locked out, and he decides to sort of break in again. So it's
mhm.
it's kind of like a Moses story, but in the future. You know, so
I love that, and I think it's so important that we can tell faith stories in different ways to draw in different types of readers.
yeah,
Because my teen boys, or when they were teens, now they're adult boys, they have not ever read any of my Amish romance books,
yeah,
which there's a
it's,
faith element
it's probably
story
a hard
too.
sell. Yeah, yeah,
But I know if I give them something like Frayed or give
yeah,
them, Amish vampires in space or, the Rataloo book, I mean, that
yeah,
is going to interest them. And I think it's so important. And I always say this like, as writers, whatever our worldview is, our beliefs are going to come in the pages of the
yeah,
book. And I think it's
absolutely.
able to reach readers that people might say, well, that is not something I would typically read. Although
Yeah,
I'm like, okay, this is pretty fun here.
yeah,
But we know people. We have, buying birthday gifts and Christmas gifts, and we have nephews or sons that would
yeah,
read these types of things. So I think it's so important to realize, like, those themes can be carried in amazing ways in this type of book.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And some of um, my favorite emails I've gotten have been from people who are definitely not believers who have picked up.
Mm,
Like I had one, it had a four-letter word like every other sentence, but he loved Amish Vampires in Space. And like, well, so I'm doing what I should be doing here. I think so.
exactly. You're able
Yeah,
to insert yourself in conversations that you never would have been able to be a part of and
yeah,
reach people who would never gone to pick up another, Bible study or, you know,
right.
uh,
Yeah, they wouldn't be
other
in a
type of
Christian
thing.
bookstore, or yeah, they wouldn't. Yeah, they wouldn't be in that section of Barnes and Noble at all.
Yeah.
But they see that Amish Vampires poster, and what is that? It stops them, makes them think, and gets them interested. So,
That is so
and
cool. And I
and it's
really
not, yeah, and it's not preachy at all. I'm just telling a story,
mhm.
with
Exactly.
trying to be as real as I can be.
Yep,
So,
and I love that. Yeah, and I did love that when I went to Realm Makers for the first time this year, and that's when I started interviewing like all these award winners. I'm like, okay, this is fascinating because I didn't read that genre, and all of a sudden I'm like reading these books, and just the way that themes are woven in, I've been so impressed. I've been
Yeah,
impressed by the people there, the friendships
yeah,
there, the
yeah.
community there, the
It's a
support.
great group. Yeah, yeah, it really is. I tell people it's like a couple hundred of your friends, some of which you've never met. You haven't met yet. Like it
Yeah,
really is a great community, and like the people there are great. So,
I
and
love
you
it.
and you'll
Okay.
find discussions, one table, and over here I'm talking about King Kong and Godzilla, and over here I'm talking about Star Wars, and then I'm in this Star Trek talk over here. It's fun.
It's
So
so true, and they'd be, like, walking by and like, "So if a laser went through the
right,
side of the
right,
ship," and
right,
just, like,
right.
these conversations, I'm like, "This is great, I love it."
Yeah.
So what are you working on next? You mentioned Ratatouille just came out. Do you have stuff that it's gonna be releasing this year or next
Yeah,
year?
so I just finished the second draft of a sort of a robot fiction story. It's not connected to anything I've written before, really. It's sort of this robot buddy idea. So I have some friend readers reading it now to give me some advice about what I want to do with it. But yeah, that will be for this year and maybe more. I have I'd like to do a short story anthology too. Like I have sort of short stories sort of all over the place. I like to
Mm,
put them all in one book. So and write some new ones for it too. So we'll see. That's kind of what I'm working on now. I'm waiting on some feedback. So
very fun.
yeah,
Alright, now my question I always have to ask at the end, what are some books that you've enjoyed lately?
I've enjoyed lately. So
Or lately or anytime? Some
anytime,
of
I
your
mean,
favorite
yeah,
ones.
I have lots of favorites. One book I've been reading lately is Jack McDevitt book called Octavia Gone. Jack McDevitt is sort of a fairly well-known science fiction writer. He's been
Mhm.
writing for a long time, and he does a really great job of um, just sort of the wonder of space. There's lots of
Mm.
exploration and mysteries. There's always mysteries to be solved and determined, and ancient archaeological digs and it's just kind of fun stuff. So the story I'm reading now is about a research satellite that was around a black hole that disappeared, but they
Okay.
don't think it actually went into the black hole. They're not sure what happened, so they're trying to sort of solve that mystery. So yeah, that. I'm trying to think what else. I have a Firefly book on my stack here too. I don't know if you know that the Firefly TV series. There's
Yes,
now
we
there's now a
watched
continuing
it.
book, and there's a continuing book series now. Hardbound books, and they're quite good. Like they could definitely be episodes on the show. So
Okay.
and
I
they've
don't
been,
even know why they stopped that show. It was so good.
yeah, it's a comedy of errors, I think. But yeah,
Yeah.
so
Well,
yeah,
very
no,
cool.
yeah, very cool.
All right, so tell us where readers can find more information about you and your books.
Okay, our website is the easiest one is www.neetz.com, Nietz, and
It's
or
spelled like this. Yep.
kerrynietz.com will work too. Yeah,
Okay.
and I'm on Facebook and on MeWe, and um, yeah, I guess those are the big ones. And my books are on Amazon, of course. So
Awesome.
they're the best place to find them.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being here today. It was so fun talking to you.
Yeah, you too. Thanks.